This video is for those who have been training for years or have just started going to the gym and their muscles aren't growing. We men love having muscles, big biceps, to flex them, but there are times when you go every day, you work hard, you try to keep your nutrition in check, but it just doesn't work out. It's interesting that the people who come to me with this kind of request don't understand what makes muscles grow. So watch this video until the end, and you'll definitely discover both obvious and not so obvious things that affect the growth of your muscle fibers. This will allow you to reduce your training volume in some areas, increase it in others, and maybe progress better. This video could be helpful even for experienced individuals. Let's begin. I've actually noticed that my most devoted fans are taxi drivers. And these guys, most often when they're driving me, they recognize me and start talking to me. Most taxi drivers recognize me. And probably it's a profession that's associated with the fact that you're always in a sitting position, you have tension in your pelvis, there's pressure in your pelvis. People frequently ask questions about how to maintain one's health. And the second most common question is, how do you build muscle? And we compiled a list of the top questions they ask. Through these questions, I discovered that some people have been going to the gym for 1 to 3 years. They don't understand why muscles grow and why muscles don't grow. Why do we naturally need to be muscular? Have you ever seen a bald chimpanzee? That's just a gigantic amount of muscle. Do you think they work out? No. Do you think gorillas spend all day from morning till night climbing trees? Well, we have types of people, let's say, who spend all day rock climbing, but they don't end up looking like gorillas. And at the same time, the gorilla doesn't eat meat, and yet the gorilla is big. So, there are rules of hypertrophy, and each species of living organism has its own. And the main rule is that muscles must be needed by a person, they must be necessary for performing certain functions. The most important role of a bodybuilder. A person who comes to the gym is entering into a dialogue with their body and explaining why their body needs their biceps to be bigger and their shoulder delts to be fuller. And the question isn't about beauty, it's about the fact that you need it. So how do you build this dialogue? So how do you get this message across? How do you tell your muscles loudly enough? Friends, you need to grow. The biceps should be 45 centimeters, not 35 centimeters. Today, by answering these questions, we'll get the most useful information that will be extremely helpful for beginners and possibly others as well.
First question, how many times a week should you train? Not every day, every other day with 2 or 3 days off.
Depending on your condition. The first misconception is that the more you train, the more likely your muscles are to grow. In reality, that's not the case. Sometimes this is one of the most common mistakes. Why aren't your muscles growing? That's too much. You're spending too much time in the gym. You're breaking down too much. This often happens during workouts. Muscle fibers in your muscles are damaged. They don't grow during the workout. They grow after the workout, depending on the conditions, what kind of workout you had, and what conditions you provided for their recovery. And the first mistake is insufficient recovery for us. Since we're talking about natural athletes, it's about them. Because very often I see advice on the internet being given by people who are working out and hiding the fact that they're on gear. And they give advice about 2 or 3 hour workouts, sharing their routines. And of course they don't comment that this kind of training is not for natural athletes. So, if we take an average person without any kind of super talent, because there are people like that. For example, there's this guy called Diki Loss, and he looks really good. Many people argue about whether he's natural or not. I can't say for sure, because there are genetically unique people who can look like that or might not look like that, and we all judge by ourselves. But if you take the average person, which is about 85 to 90% of the population, it's considered that 3 workouts a week are optimal. If you came to the gym and really gave it your all, then 3 workouts a week, maximum 4. Most often, if it's already 4 workouts, minus 30% of people who can actually allow themselves to do that, and they just won't recover properly. And it's actually very hard to get through to a person that if you work out less, you'll gain more. It's a paradox, but that's actually the hardest thing to do. Do you think it's harder to get someone into the gym? No, there are people who are so fanatical, they just love going and working out so much that it's actually hard for them to work out less. There is a basic concept behind why muscles grow. Let's think about it. First, mechanical work itself leads to hypertrophy. There are many examples like that. Or there are professions where you don't work to failure. You don't work to failure. But because, for example, you're a loader. He carries bags and throws watermelons all day long. Francis Ngannou got strong using a shovel. But he doesn't work with it to the point of failure. You should never work with a shovel to failure. but you keep shoveling sand, you keep throwing it, and you just have bigger delts, you're broader, it affects you. Swimmers likely don't work to failure, but still build muscle, leading to hypertrophy of certain fibers. So, it's not like it's black and white here, grows or doesn't grow. There's no such thing here as 4 reps is for mass, 15 reps is for cutting. That's not how it works. All repetitions are important. And that's why you can build muscle, even with high rep training. The other question is, to what size and how will it look? You need to understand what causes growth. It's muscle work that makes you grow. That's why you grow. And with high rep training, there's also that component. Secondly, growth happens because of the trauma to the muscle fibers themselves. That is, besides the work itself, the muscle also gets injured. And you start making your body send out growth factors, repair, recovery, and swelling. That's why the muscles are like that, including after a workout. And the third factor is the metabolic state. This is what happens on the biochemical level. Lactic acid is released, electrolytes are moving back and forth. Creatine is a biochemical component. There are 3 things that affect muscle growth: fiber work, fiber trauma, and biochemical changes. And that's why when you're doing high repetition sets, a certain type of work, not to failure, allows you to achieve hypertrophy. When you work to failure or with heavier weights, you traumatize the fiber, and that also helps you grow. When you create some biochemical changes like increased acidity, that helps as well. Let me give you another vivid example. People who don't work out to failure, and this leads to muscle hypertrophy. Ready? Have you seen track cyclists? On not very long distances, when he looks like a centaur, when the handlebars are small, well, it's still sporty anyway. And such quadriceps, such calves, especially when it's not very long distances, you can't make runners out of them. Coronations, yes, but for short ones. So does all this actually help you grow? And that's why the best style of kacha is where you somehow combine all of this. I love
To mix water. I love to mix.
That's why. That is to do something for them to remember. So there, for 10 to 12, some repetitions, sets, add weight, or start with 12 to 15 repetitions, increase the repetitions, increase the weight and go to failure, but with a smaller volume. That is, if you started with heavier weights, you don't do it, but you pre-fatigue the muscle, you can already go to failure with less weight. Drop sets work by engaging additional muscle fibers and causing more microtrauma. You reach failure, drop the weight, and reach failure again.
Again to failure. It's almost endless right away, yes.
Forced reps, when you're at failure and someone helps you lift the barbell, I love that. You're pressing and they help you finish the rep, feeling like you're just hanging on the bar. You say, I'm not pressing, but you say, you are pressing. These techniques allow you to push yourself to the limit. There's no such thing as this makes you grow. This doesn't make you grow. Growth can come from various sources, but it's optimal when it's multifaceted, stemming from both biochemical factors and trauma. There's also the question of genetics. We'll answer that.
Next, creatively. What did he say? That's a good topic, colleagues.
Creatine. I rarely take creatine, even though I produce a really cool creatine. By the way, the link to my sports nutrition is below this video. We have an impressive factory in Dubna. Listen, creatine isn't necessary for everyone all the time. It depends on your sport. Swimmers don't need it, but it can help bodybuilders, for instance. What does it do? It allows you to have more energy, which lets you do 1 or 2 extra reps. If you increased from 8 to 10, there's a higher risk of injury. What's the benefit? So you get injured more, right? The muscle fiber gets damaged more, the fiber does more work, and biochemically, creatine will help you recover better. If you add a little more after your workout, that's actually a good thing. Usually, it's recommended to take it in the morning with carbohydrates.
There's a loading scheme.
Loading up before your workout and adding a bit more right before starting is a good approach that I appreciate. After the cycle, I went from the loading phase to 2.5 grams. I don't recommend taking a lot, usually 2.5 grams, maximum 5 before, and 2.5 grams after. But about the loading phase, it's not really necessary to do it. For example, I've never done a loading phase because I tend to retain water, I get bloated, so I just started taking it without loading. If
a person is skinny, where
for people like me, gaining weight is difficult. If creatine helps you, it will help you reach your desired results faster. Maybe that's why you should try it.
I see. Glutamine.
Glutamine, actually, maybe someone's answer will surprise you. I see glutamine as being very beneficial from the perspective of the gut. Another interesting fact is that many people who take glutamine experience a significant increase in semen volume. Nowadays, people watch a lot of adult films, then come and ask, how can I make it so there's more? But there are people who help solve this issue when the volume and the shots or the amount bothers many. Hurt sperm is not significant, but glutamine helps many who have very little.
And also after training before
recovery. But the gastrointestinal tract, including why it helps with recovery and has a positive effect on the nervous system, you influence the intestines and, among other things, your nervous system. The largest number of nerve fibers, and the largest number of not fibers but immune cells, that's why it's the most difficult to transplant the intestine, it's the hardest organ to transplant. Kubuya, only 12 transplants have been done. The intestine experiences the strongest rejection and has the most lymphatic tissue and immunity. Just a brief note on that. Cells separate what happens in the intestinal cavity from what happens in the bloodstream. And that's why when there's a problem, there's such a thing as a chylomicron. A chylomicron can carry what should only be in the intestines, bacterial walls that trigger an immune response, can get into the chylomicron, and the chylomicron will transport it through the lymphatic duct somewhere, and there it will get a response. And that's why when people say there's a rash or something from something, or that something causes cancer or some kind of dysbacteriosis, it could be they just don't understand. Mechanism of action. This is mediated by these helomicrons, which capture this bad bacterium, the dead one, already grabbing the wall, carrying it somewhere, and there your immune system starts to attack it. This causes arthritis, yes, where the intestine is, where arthritis is, maybe. And if before it was leaky gut, that's a leaky intestine. This was such a red flag, and because of this, they said that this is not a real doctor, this is a pseudo-doctor. But now there are a huge number of studies, confirmed, proven, and even under electron microscopy you can see how everything works. So just open it and read it. Although there are doctors whom this academician lied to, yes, it's called like pseudoscience. Our people established that, gave out titles, discredited the person. But now, when everyone is talking about it, who
is going to apologize? So, about recovery, what's the best way to recover? It's clear that you need to sleep, eat, all that, but how is it best to do this while working in an office? There?
Listen, well, the best recovery... Actually, in fact, I really like active recovery. So you go to the gym and then you just walk around, take a stroll. Recovery isn't just lying on the couch, contrary to popular belief. I use cryosaunas or regular saunas for recovery whenever possible. Sometimes I go for a gentle, soft massage because a hard sports, heavy massage is not recovery. It's an additional trauma. That's something you really need to understand. Gentle, soft massages and proper nutrition are essential for recovery. So you need to replenish electrolytes. You also need to consume enough protein and vitamins. Sleep is the most important thing, the main mistake people make. You know, people think that during sleep everything just shuts off, that you're just sleeping. People who are deprived of sleep, meaning they aren't allowed to sleep, they die, not because something happens in their head. They often start to suffer from organ dysfunction, and very often it's the organs that are affected. Night is a period of recovery, it's a period, let's say, of defragmentation of the disc. And that's why the levels of hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones, stress hormones, and not only those, depend on when you go to sleep and how well you sleep. We have an episode about sleep, which is easier to watch, that's why sleep is very important. And people who don't get enough sleep, an interesting fact, if they miss an hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep a day, their sex hormone levels start to exceed their biological age by 12 to 15 years. So if you regularly sleep 2 or 3 hours less, for example, instead of 8 hours, you sleep 7 or even just 4 to 5 hours, your testosterone level at 25 will be the same as it will be when you're 35 or 40. Just because of sleep. About calorie surplus, I think it's logical. Many people think they eat a lot and enough, but when they start counting their diet, when you tell them to write down what they consume and you calculate it, it turns out to be just 2,500 calories. What are you supposed to build from that? The body is designed in such a way that when you end up on a deserted island and start eating little and moving a lot, well, basically, imagine a gym and there's a calorie deficit. You won't be building muscle. The body isn't stupid. It'll do everything it can just to survive. It will get rid of muscle. It's a good reserve of amino acids, and at the same time you'll be losing fat as slowly as possible. That's why muscles grow. If we're talking about a natural athlete, when you have proper nutrition and a calorie surplus, is it possible to grow on a deficit? But if a person has never done anything before, they're overweight, obese, and they come in, yes, for a certain period of time. Up to a certain body fat percentage, you can sometimes grow muscle in a calorie deficit even when using pharmacology. But the lower the body fat percentage, the less often this rule works. The body is designed in such a way that the processes of anabolism and catabolism don't really go well together when it comes to building.
You previously mentioned that weight gain supplements are not very effective for increasing calorie intake.
I produce sports nutrition in IPSUM, but despite that, I always say that it's just a way to make up for your deficiencies. If you can't get it from food, I produce protein, but I always say that the most important thing is healthy, high quality, proper meat, as natural as possible. If you can't eat enough, if it's hard to eat enough, if it's expensive to eat enough, this is just an additional source. But if protein is okay, then a gainer is a way to make up for calories. It's hard to explain, but it's harmful. It's harmful. These are simple sugars, usually in large amounts. Many trainers will now say that there's nothing wrong with it because they only see it from the perspective of how many calories and in what form enter the bloodstream. I see it a bit deeper. I just look at it from the perspective of how the intestines work. These simple sugars that we throw into the intestines, they change the microflora, and this also leads to changes in immunity and so on and so on. The core issue is that people don't recognize the deeper problem with Coca-Cola. They simply ask, what's so bad about it? 20 grams of sugar, but the harm that sugar does to our digestive tract, that's not good. When you can get all the benefits from the right carbs, it's best to choose wisely. Fast carbs aren't necessarily bad. There's an appropriate dose and timing that must be considered. Eating a banana, half a banana, pasta, or mashed potatoes after a workout is perfectly fine. Yes, everything is allowed. There is no truly harmful food, and there is no food that is actually completely healthy. Everything depends on the dose and timing, and whether it matches the level of physical activity you're experiencing. Top 5 supplements. Supplements.
For what? Well, do you want to bulk up at the gym? These are 5 supplements that will help in some good way.
Well, probably. Protein compensates for a lack of protein.
Isolate, don't worry about it.
Well, hydrolysate, probably not. The overpayment is too high. Probably just regular isolate. I also really like it when people buy super purified protein and then mix it with regular milk, turning it into cheap protein. I disagree that branched chain amino acid supplements are helpful. If a company produces them, that's precisely why I don't, as they are essentially useless. If you're going to take amino acids, it's better to take regular ones. The same amount of branched chain amino acids can be found in a serving of the protein you're already consuming. The role of these substances is exaggerated. Studies barely prove their effectiveness, which also applies to glutamine. That's why creatine, creatine, everyone will confirm this, is the most effective supplement.
You need to cycle it, though.
But studies claiming it will destroy your kidneys or cause similar harm if used within reasonable limits don't exist. But most of the studies that have been conducted recommend taking creatine in cycles, 8, 10, at most 12 weeks. Then you should take a break for half the duration that you are using it. And in general, there is such a thing as cycles. One way to make your muscles grow is to show them that the load is constantly increasing, that adaptation is necessary because the volume of training load is growing, always growing, but it can't grow endlessly. And that's why these cycles exist, 8, 12, 16 weeks. So you grow, then take a break. Then again, you grow, and then another break. Training programs consist of microcycles, macrocycles, and small cycles. Actually, if you have some long-term goals, you shouldn't just focus on the next 6 weeks, but think about how things will look over the course of a year. A competent coach will inform you. We have an annual program divided into stages, and you're currently at this specific stage. That's absolutely right, and that's exactly how you should approach it. ZMAs, zinc, possibly testosterone, Magni B6, and electrolytes are likely necessary if you're actively training and sweating a lot. I also enjoy adding electrolytes. And probably, in my case, when I'm training, I don't like arginine, but I do like arginine. I like arginine because it gives me an extra pump. It helps stretch the fascia. Fascia is an interesting topic related to muscle memory. When you work out, your muscles become denser and stretch the fascia. There are even techniques, for example, Hani Rambod, the trainer of many Mr. Olympia champions, came up with this. When you use small weights, you pump, stretch, and stretch. That's why arginine probably, goes there as well. That is muscle growth.
It's not just growth, it's also the stretching of the sheath in which the muscle is located.
It's stretching. It's not just growth happening there. There's also hypertrophy. The volume of the cells increases. The number of mitochondria increases. There are a lot of processes involved. And an important point that I also wanted to mention is why some people, and actually many people, think that you can just inject testosterone with a syringe and everything will happen by itself. But it doesn't work that way. If it did, then everyone who was on hormone replacement therapy would be jacked. The body won't do anything if you don't use it, and there's no need for it. It will just get rid of it. So even on high doses of testosterone, you can basically be just an average person and you'd never think that you're on testosterone. Sending signals is crucial for the body to recognize the need for muscle fiber and hypertrophy. Regarding why some muscles don't grow endlessly, why some people have such genetic potential, they can lift 5 times and have arms like that, while others have less, sometimes for years. There's myostatin. You know what myostatin is. Myostatin is what doesn't let you hypertrophy endlessly. Myostatin controls you so that you only reach a certain level of hypertrophy. And the bigger the muscle gets, the harder it is for a natural athlete to maintain that size, and the harder it is to achieve further hypertrophy because myostatin stops muscle growth. And right now, I won't mention any names. There are monoclonal antibodies that some guys inject to block the action of myostatin and increase the potential for hypertrophy. Natural athletes rarely do this. I don't recommend doing this because as an oncologist, I can say that it can negatively affect certain things regarding your prognosis. It affects all the muscles at once up top. The tongue will grow there. A genetic defect in myostatin can cause a disease where it doesn't function properly. These people, they are bigger, they are stronger, so it's not just about size, but their strength also increases, and they are genetically larger, even though they don't do anything for it. Many traits are genetically determined. When people see a skinny person, they often assume he doesn't exercise. Genetics play a role, but many people believe success solely depends on training and recovery. You can do everything exactly the same as another person, and you'll get completely different results. You can achieve twice as much as he can, but the results will be entirely different due to genetics. One genetic factor is myostatin. Your efforts aren't the sole determinant of results. Understand this to avoid disappointment if following someone else's workout doesn't yield the same outcomes for you. This is normal under normal testosterone levels. Know when you know, as they say, that any limit has a genetic boundary and there's a chemical pharmacological lawlessness. This is exactly about that. These drugs help you overcome that limit.
But if genetics are against you, if a person is skinny, should he just give up and leave it all? No.
No, anyone can bulk up. Anyone can bulk up. Absolutely anyone.
The only limits are your soul. What I'm saying is true. Anyone can cook, but only the fearless can achieve greatness.
It's just a question of how far you'll go and how much effort it will take from you. The same applies to overweight individuals. It's nonsense when someone claims I can't lose weight. Anyone can lose weight. Even with the most severe endocrine disorders, almost anyone can lose weight. It's just a matter of the amount of effort required. It might be incredibly, almost impossibly hard, but anyone can lose weight. So, when people say it's impossible, that's not true. Anyone can build muscle and anyone can lose weight. Absolutely anyone. It's just a matter of willpower. The stomach goes hop hop. Well, yeah, when someone loses their belly, when they just stop eating or have their stomach cut out, that's the last resort. And they really support that thing.
Yes, many.
They think you only need heavier weights, but that's actually not true. As we've already discussed, you can combine both light and heavy weights. What else do we have? About local hypertrophy, is it possible? Many people think that if you inject something, leave, and everything will grow. Local hypertrophy. There are plenty of examples of local hypertrophy. What is local hypertrophy? Look, there's a theory that says if you do the basics, your whole body will grow. Let's remember track cyclists again whose whole body doesn't grow because they actively
Train.
If you do squats well, your biceps will grow faster.
Yes, no.
It doesn't always work, unfortunately.
This is from the side of Lockley. Well, yes, like...
Growth hormone is released and it doesn't act locally, it affects the whole body. Of course, there is a small contribution to this. And really, people who do basic training, I mean exercises, they grow more. But there, it's just that large muscle groups are involved in a big complex, but still, without local impact on the muscle, there won't be local hypertrophy. You've seen arm wrestlers. You've seen people who only wrestle with one arm, and they have this arm. They might have an injury or simply a very strong right arm. Often their right arm is massive compared to their left. The body doesn't work like that, where you just get a growth on your arms or a growth on your legs. It's still dependent on local stimulation. Recall that muscle fiber growth is influenced by biochemical factors. How can systemic changes alter the biochemistry within a specific muscle fiber? No way, if you don't work it. Injury. How can there be an effect? You can remove the injury component if you don't work on it. The third is mechanical impact, that is work. So in fact, all three components are present. Just because you squat with your legs, you won't get biceps like that just from squatting.
Some people obsess over perfect technique, while others prioritize getting it done and pump it up, even if it involves using momentum.
There are methods where you don't train in the classic way at all, what is considered the classic way. It is believed that for 80% of people, hypertrophy occurs if you do more than 10 to 12 working sets per target muscle group per week. And of course, you get more stimulus when you train with heavier weights. Menzer Dorin Yates. They also advocated a method where you come in and do a few warm-up sets and then just one incredible, really heavy, difficult set, right to absolute failure. And this leads to amazing hypertrophy. Dorian Yates, with the help of pharmacology, popularized the trend of bodybuilders having massive physiques, prioritizing size over aesthetics. He had the nickname Colossus but was injured. That is, this is fraught with a higher risk of injury because the closer and more often you reach failure, the more frequent and severe the injuries become. There is a connection, but it's not universal. People frequently ask about the relationship between strength and hypertrophy, wondering, what about strength? So, can I just work on strength and will I definitely get big 100%? The stronger you are, most likely the bigger your muscles will be. You can't work on strength and not gain size. You will gain size. But if this connection is linear, does it mean if you become twice as strong, you become twice as big? No, absolutely not. In the Olympics, 95% of the weightlifters are stronger but have much less muscle mass compared to bodybuilders in the gym, despite being 3 to 4 times smaller in size. Some Chinese guy weighing 65 kilograms lifts a weight that no one in your gym, even those weighing around 120 kilograms and packed with muscle, can lift or press. So, there is a connection, of course, but it's not exact, it's not linear. About the cardio question, many people think that cardio isn't necessary at all, but cardio is absolutely necessary. You have to train your heart muscle and your cardiovascular system. And that's why it's very important. Actually, even if you're bulking, you should still do cardio workouts. That means you need to include aerobic training as well. That's absolutely correct, because actually your metabolism will be better. And many people are afraid that they'll lose muscle. But if you do everything smartly, correctly, and with a good routine, that won't happen. A good routine is a breathing test, not when you're out of breath. I've mentioned this before. You should exercise at an intensity where you can easily maintain a conversation while jogging lightly. 20-20, 5 to 30 minutes of cardio training, you need to work your heart muscle too. If you're aiming for muscle hypertrophy, your heart also needs it. The main problem for athletes who develop heart failure is that due to pharmacology, the heart muscle and cardiovascular system can't keep up with the super fast growth of the body. That's where the problem can arise. In general, many people face issues due to pharmacology. Why do modern athletes look worse professionally? They reach that muscle volume of hypertrophy faster than they used to before, so in the past, super heavyweight, it was about 35 plus 30. Plus now there are 20-year-olds, 20 plus, at the Olympia. It turns out that because they come up faster, these muscles, they're not developed, they're not defined, so there's no hardness, no quality like Coleman had, because he built up to it, gradually. And here is Nick Volkerbach, but he's not handsome, already has a belly at his age. And there are a lot of examples like that. So, if you take the Olympics, the 2000, 95, 2005 probably, and compare it to today's top wouldn't even make it into the top 5 back then. Ideally, if you take the Olympics, any sport should progress every year, and if you compare the difference over 20 years, today's athletes would beat everyone who competed back then. But unfortunately, that's not the case in bodybuilding.
So, if a person wants to go to the gym and really do things properly, it's better for them to focus on cardio for about a year first and only then start working with weights. Start both at the same time.
Develop yourself comprehensively by doing everything in parallel. Don't forget to stretch and grow in all areas. They do it so that they stick the sticker on the back. There's a video of this. He can't tear it off. So you need to understand that the body doesn't really like one-sided development. You need to develop yourself as comprehensively as possible. About atrophy, yes. Here's a simple example. You definitely need muscle stimulation, that is, physical impact on the muscles. Otherwise, it won't grow. They looked at a person who was paralyzed and doesn't use his legs, and his legs were like this, very thin. And now a question for all the people who say that it's enough to just do the basics or some things and everything will grow for you. Why do these athletes who compete in Paralympic disciplines have such developed upper bodies and such untrained legs if their legs are paralyzed? If the rule is that growth hormone and all that is distributed through the bloodstream and everything grows, why is it that even when they're taking pharmaceuticals, well, there are disciplines, like sometimes among people without legs, where they compete with those who just have a cut. Why doesn't it grow for them? I've operated on such patients more than once in my life. I had a girl from Crimea. I removed her bladder. The vessels that normally supply the legs, the ones that go into the legs, For us, it's about the size of your big toe. That's your reference point. There's a vessel like that going.
That's the artery that goes into the leg. Yes, that's it.
That's the iliac artery, and there are veins running parallel to it. And we remove lymph nodes from there as well. Hers were about half the size of my pinky, about half of my pinky finger. So we always think that the issue of atrophy is only about muscles, only about ligaments. No, it also includes everything that supplies blood and everything around it. And these vessels of hers, they weren't covered with fat, meaning the lymphatic ducts there were weaker, so it's all connected together. That's why atrophy primarily occurs due to the lack of proper stimulation of the muscle fibers. Is it possible to build muscle without using chemicals? By the way, Sasha, what do you think?
Is it possible to be in good athletic shape without using chemicals? Most people. I haven't even touched it somehow.
Are there people who will never look good without chemicals? Absolutely there are. Because being an all-around great athlete, you might not look very good. Look at Daniel Camillano. I love to use him as an example. The guy just has amazing endurance. He's very strong. He's a fighter. Look at how many weight cuts he's gone through. He never looked good. He was like a samovar. He was a samovar who could knock you out. 99% of the guys who look really good and muscular, 99 and 99% are watching this video. Unfortunately, not always do the volume of proper training and intensity lead to us looking super good. You have to understand that genetics determine a lot, unfortunately, so is it possible to get muscular without using any substances? Of course, it's a question of the limit and the maximum you can reach, and the methods and effort you put into it. But what I definitely don't recommend doing is starting to use all those substances and going down that path. I'm generally against it, but I frequently see coaches persuading people in particular. So, after half a year or a year, there's some progress, but instead of looking for ways to improve naturally, everyone wants quick results. Building fitness takes a year, but people expect results in just 3 months and get upset if they haven't bulked up by summer. Gradual progress is key. It's normal to gain 1.5 kilos of muscle in a year, but people wish it happened faster. And the big problem is that many trainers actually don't discourage this, but help with it, because most often people come to them and say, I want results fast. He's not his dad and won't talk him out of it. Instead, he'll profit from him and encourage him to continue. It's a significant issue. Regrettably, many trainers don't judge it and simply agree, despite being seen as role models.
If someone wants fast results, consider Filip Kirkorov's recent biceps as an example. What are your thoughts on that?
What do you think? I think that those who love Filip Bedrosevic in our country really love him, not because of the size of his biceps. He's trying to stay trendy. He's a man of age. Maybe he doesn't have as much time to work out as he'd like, or maybe he's just lazy. I think that maybe most likely they might have introduced something there. It doesn't look natural. At that age, it's impossible to get such localized hypertrophy so quickly. Within 3 months, his arm size doubled. The exact procedure is unknown, but it could have involved hyaluronic acid, lipofilling, or fat injections. They injected something, I don't know, to each their own. I'm not one to judge anyone because I believe everyone has the right to do whatever they want with their own body. And if you demand respect for yourself, give it to others as well. But I would never do that to myself. Muscle. Why do I respect all the guys who build their bodies naturally? Because it takes character, it takes discipline, it takes the ability to do what you have to do, not just what you want to do. Do you think I'm lazy? But in business and in my team, I really respect, love, and attract such people to my team. And I invite people who are athletic to join the team. Because the discipline they have in sports, they also have in everyday life. It's easier for me to connect with them. You don't need to force them into anything. When a person is overweight, doesn't exercise, and has let themselves go, they tend to exhibit the same lazy behavior in other aspects of life. I'm not even talking about the fact that, as an oncologist, I see that 90% of the people in the department I head are overweight. Even if you remove all the other downsides, well, this is the way it is. That's why when I see a person with a beautiful body, even on chemo, I know that a very beautiful body is on chemo. Without considerable effort, they won't succeed. That's why, according to statistics, 90% of people who use steroids in the gym will never tell you about it. Because especially they were the first to act like haters. When they wrote somewhere, when they tried, when they saw, it's just that they're even ashamed to admit it. Because if he looks like that on steroids, people start treating achievements differently because many think it's just about taking a shot and that's it. A beautiful body is, above all, the result of incredible hard work. So, respect to everyone, even if you're on steroids. If you've achieved good results, I always respect you a lot. Because I've been through all of this myself and I know what a tremendous amount of work you have to put into it. And those who say otherwise, who say it's easy, that's just because they lack experience. You'll have a completely different attitude toward this once you've been in those shoes and realize how difficult it is.
Because this body, you can't buy it with money. When you see someone with a beautiful body, you understand